practice owners aren't business people. Practice owners don't understand the psychology of an associate and what they want.
It sounds like you never had anybody who really helped you in that respect.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Corporates have failed to understand this very important thing. The dentist is the most important person in the room. The dentist is the person who generates the practice money. The dentist is the person who the patients trust and believe in. Practice owners, especially the NHS focus, have been slow to react and understand that things are changing. So you need to, the practice and the business model needs to change as well.
Hi everyone, welcome to Dentistry Unmasked. My guest today is Mudasser Hussain. Now, Mudasser is doing some wonderful things not only in dentistry but also with other small businesses. He runs his own coaching company, Clarity Coaching International. Now, his story behind this is an interesting one because he got into this through difficulty with being an NHS associate. So he ran into some difficulties with the practice that he was working in, and the difficulties really, came to a peak during the COVID-19 pandemic. And shortly after, as a fallout from leaving that position, he appeared in front of the GDC. These were tough times for Mudasser, and he really needed an outlet to really change his mindset and improve his life. And he discovered coaching, and it was such a transformation for him that he decided to get involved with it himself, but from the other side, so set up Clarity Coaching International. Now, Mudasser and I, we connected initially on social media, and he invited me to come on his podcast, which is called Diary of a Dental Coach. And there's a link below if you want to listen to that podcast that I appeared on. Now, he invited me onto his podcast to talk about my mindset and how I run a private dental practice, and obviously the teaching courses that we do as well. So I invited him onto Dentistry Unmasked because I wanted to get his perspective on life as an NHS associate, because I haven't been involved in NHS dentistry now for over a decade. So given that the bulk of the dental workforce is actually NHS-based, NHS associates, it's really interesting for me, and I hope you find it interesting too. It's really interesting for me to hear the perspective on it of an NHS associate and what their daily life is like and what their view of principles are. I found it a bit of an eye-opener. I'd be interested to know what you guys think of this as well. But yeah, it was interesting to hear his story, his perspective on NHS practice, and how to improve and move forward from the current position that we're in within NHS dentistry. So yeah, have a listen, and as always, I appreciate your comments. I must say we're coming towards the end of season 1 now, and most of the comments I get, people don't like to comment publicly, and I can understand why. So we get a lot of private emails, so thank you for your emails, thank you for your questions, and your support as well. Last episode with Mike Hesketh was the most downloaded podcast so far, so it looks like you all really enjoyed that one. I'd just like to say a big thank you to our 2 sponsors, Unique Implant Training and also Former Dental Supplies, who supply our vertical prep burrs for our BOPT courses. And I always say that if you like, subscribe, comment, share, you're always in line to win a vertical prep burr kit. And I'm happy to say that Ilan Press of Bow Lane Dental Group is the winner of a vertical prep kit, which is worth £200. So Ilan, thank you very much for commenting and sharing, and I will ensure that you get your burr kit very soon. So guys, thank you as always for your support. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, just I'd appreciate if you left a little like, a comment or a share, and you'll be in line to win one of those BOPT burr kits, and it just helps us grow this podcast as well. Thank you very much. Enjoy the episode.
Mudasser, welcome to Dentistry Unmasked. Thank you for making the trip across the Pennines this morning.
Thank you.
So welcome, and we've been communicating. I've actually been on your podcast as well, and you're doing some great things in dentistry. So I think I'd like to start with, please tell me what it is that you're doing and what is your mission. So how do you want to change the industry?
So for myself, I'm all about well, obviously I'm a coach, so I'm all about trying to change the culture within dentistry and introduce a coaching culture within dentistry, and try and bring about some changes to help the profession, really.
Okay, so why? I mean, what's your story? What's your background? What happened? There's a unique set of events that actually happened to you. Let's start with the most recent stuff, which made you think that some change is necessary, right?
Yeah, I mean, for many, many years, I was an NHS associate and just plodded along as normal. But then the pandemic came, and I think for a lot of associates, as well as practices, it brought a lot of challenges and a lot of problems. And yeah, like a lot of associates, I wasn't paid correctly, and I was obviously felt disheartened by that because I had a small family and children, and I was regularly earning less than I felt like I should, and there was no clear guidance from the BDA and NHS. So after working at a practice for nearly 5 years, I decided it was time to move on, and then I decided to move on from that practice.
If you don't mind me digging a little bit deeper into that, when you say you weren't paid correctly, are we allowed to go and dive into that?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't clear guidance from the NHS or BDA, to be fair, at the time. And I think a lot of practice owners, obviously, some were getting abatements, etc. So they had their own local arrangement with the associates. For me, it was just a case of I'd wanted to leave previously before, but I think the pandemic just made me realise that it was time to get out. And I was working in a one surgery practice, practically running the show for nearly 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
So for me, it was like I needed to start experiencing what happens outside the practice. It was a lovely practice, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed working with the team there. I had a great time there. But I think the pandemic, like for everyone starts to reflect on things and thinks, you know what, it might be time to leave. And obviously I handed in my notice back in March 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I wanted to leave amicably and leave in the right way. And I think it's quite a common scenario where perhaps practice owners become difficult when an associate wants to leave. But I myself remained as professional as I could and wanted to obviously leave on good terms, and agreed to work a 3-month notice period with them. As time went on, because we were a small team, things changed significantly in terms of the dynamics and the atmosphere within the practice. And that really sort of impacted me significantly, because being the sole clinician in charge of this practice and the team then sort of almost blaming you because this clinic was then being closed down and moving to a different site. So there was a lot of, I suppose they resented the fact that I was leaving. And yeah, so things became quite toxic during that period, and it's quite a stressful period. And again, I'd say to dentists, I reached out to the confidential helpline at the time and thought I need help because I really don't know how to handle this situation. I was scared to go to work, and just where you just didn't feel well enough to go to work. And it got, for the first time ever in my practicing career, I'd actually gone to the doctor and said, look, this is how I feel. And I got a sick note for 2 weeks. And they said, look, you need to take some time out here because this is really, really impacting you significantly. So I got a sick note and said, and told the practice owner, look, I need some time out. I'm happy to continue working that 3-month notice period, but I need some time out. And it was at that point that obviously it was sort of agreed that it might be better if I left. And I felt like we parted on reasonably good terms, despite it being a strained end to the relationship.
There was some further ramifications, though, wasn't there? Something happened further down the line. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I didn't obviously envisage this because on the emails and the communications, I could tell things were strained, but I didn't envisage what would unfold later on, and didn't realise that perhaps the seriousness of what would happen. So several weeks after I left, I received a letter through NHS England regarding a complaint that was made against me. And at the time, I didn't really think of it as being a serious matter, because in my head I felt, and this is the thing that as dentists we like to do, is we think we think we know how to solve this, or we think, okay, we're right. But what you realise is, especially quite quickly in these situations, is that the solicitors, the indemnity, the legal people know what they're talking about. So even though you might think you have an idea of dealing with this scenario, my advice to all dentists is always follow your indemnity's advice. So yeah, I received this letter out of the blue, and I didn't really realise the seriousness of it, and quite quickly it got escalated to the GDC. And at that point, obviously, as dentists, we all fear the GDC, and we all are quite scared of the GDC. So I think at the time, after having a meeting with my indemnity solicitor, it came as a complete shock of what I was accused of. And
are we allowed to dig into that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the case is over. It was a dishonesty case. I mean, I don't really want to go too much about the detail, but
sure.
Basically I was accused of doing something that I didn't do. And the problem I had was that obviously I had this strained relationship with the staff that worked at the practice, and they'd concocted a story together, and I had no way of really disproving this story. And you're like stuck in a way, because you're having these conversations with your indemnity, and they're like, well, it's 2 against 1. You're in a lot of trouble here, because how are you going to prove that this didn't happen? And the second reason is, why would they lie? What was the motivation for them to make a story like this up? So that's when you realise that this was an attack on my integrity. This was an attack on my character. This was a massive, serious situation, like career-ending situation. And it was devastating in a way, because I'd just gone through that toxic period of working in that practice where I wanted to leave, and things became strained. And I'm now a few weeks later, and I was due to start a new job at the time. So I get this out of the blue and realise it's gone to the GDC. And it was within like 2 weeks I was due to start my new position. So obviously you're devastated by what's happening. And it's sort of almost panic, because your indemnity solicitor saying, look, you could get struck off here. You do know that this is very serious. And it was only then that it sort of hit me, and it was like, wow, I don't actually have any idea of how I'm going to deal with this false accusation that was made against me.
Did this have a knock-on effect for your new position? Were you able to start your new job?
This is the thing, and I was fortunate, and I still work at that practice. I was fortunate. I was quite clear and honest, and that's important. I think if you start a relationship wrong, never lie to a practice owner, never do anything that might come back. So I was, as soon as I received it, rang the manager, told the practice owner, this is the situation. And I even was at the point where I even said to him, look, I understand if you don't want to take me on, because this looks like it's going to become quite serious, and there's obviously the possibility, and my indemnity solicitor was saying that, look, you could be suspended for a while before this even gets dealt with. So there was in a practice owner's mind, this was, and I was fortunate enough that because I was honest, transparent, showed them evidences that I had, they backed me, even though they didn't know me at all. I didn't know them. So I was quite fortunate in that sense. So that was a part-time position, but because my plan was to work across a couple of different practices, but equally so, I had a negative experience with a larger corporate who, when I'd been offered a job there for 3 days a week. When I told them the situation, they'd escalated it to their clinical operations director, and they basically withdrew their offer. So I was in a situation where, and just before all this happened, I just bought a house. So it's just like the worst possible time for all this to kick off, financially, etc.
You got 3 young kids as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and quite around that time, we found out my wife was pregnant as well.
Wow.
So we had a third child on our way. So it was heartbreaking. It was devastating. It was, I don't know if I'm going to use it, but the shit hits the fan kind of situation. So
you kept your NHS registration at that stage. So then it goes to the GDC.
Yeah.
So what's that process like? What happens there?
So for me, it was quite easy that time because we'd already responded to NHS England.
Yeah.
So the letter was pretty much the same. It was like, this is what we did. And this is, and it's important to have that, anyone who's going through a GDC investigation is remember, and if you've got good indemnity, people around you, they'll advise you to remember that, be consistent in what you say.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, as well with memory, as time goes on, your memory can distort things or change things. So the longer it is from the period, the more it changes. So it's important that whenever you respond to a formal letter, be consistent in your answer as well. And even minor little changes, even the order of how you might say this happened first and that happened, you got to understand that at the end, because as a dentist, you don't really think about where it's heading or what the end game is, but your indemnity and the people around you, they go through this process day in, day out. So that's why it's important to, and this is something that I want to change from a dental cultural point of view, is we always have this attitude that we know everything, we know how to handle this, we know how to deal with this, but these guys are trained, these guys do this day in, day out. Just because you think it's right or you think your perspective, it actually doesn't matter. What matters is the perspective of your indemnity and your barrister, and they almost always have the best interest for you, especially if you've got the right people. But secondly, for myself, what I did initially, which perhaps I advise, is that I had an indemnity solicitor, but they weren't dental. So I specifically requested and I said I'd pay for that to get a dental legal advisor, because I wanted to hear from them what their view was specifically on this case. And I think it's important because not always do the indemnity put you in touch with a dental legal advisor. So that's normally a dentist who's qualified.
Really?
Yeah.
So what? So you just get some solicitor that's dealing with multiple.
Yeah, a lot of the time they're healthcare, so they'll deal with nurses, they'll deal with doctors, they'll deal with lots of different.
So you might land with a solicitor who's never dealt with a dentist before.
Sometimes, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Gosh. So from the initial communications, I presume then there's a face-to-face. Is that right? Is there a hearing where you're...
No, it goes to case examiners first.
Right.
So you respond, then it goes to case examiners, then there's a process of I suppose investigation. So you're spending months. So for me personally, I was spending months working part-time, not knowing where this is going. Your solicitor's telling you it's going to end up at a hearing, and to be honest, it took a very, very long time for things to progress. So there was a period where obviously it goes to case examiners, or they'll ask you to fill out a form, for example. So on that form, I have to put who I've ever worked for example, and obviously I had to put the owners,
right,
who I had this strained relationship. So this was going to be interesting because it was going to be like, I now have to put people who I've worked with, and I know I've got strained. What are they going to do, and how are they going to respond to the letter and things like that? Because that's what the GDC do. They ask you, who have you ever worked for, and they email them all. Right. And again, that's quite. I think that's unfair. I think that's unfair because people generally, especially if you've left, sometimes don't always, even if you leave on good terms, they're not always in a position where they want to help you because at the time you were useful to them, perhaps generated money for them, but when you leave, people aren't interested in you. So it's a difficult one and it's a difficult scenario, but I think it's really unfair. I think it's the last 2 or 3 years that whoever you've ever worked for. And the problem for me was that it was the owners pretty much who I'd only worked for in the last 3 or 4 years.
Right. Hi guys, are you thinking about getting into dental implantology? Well, if you didn't know, I'm one of the founding members of Unique Implant Training. Unique Implant Training is now in its 5th year, and we are now fully EduQual accredited to diploma level, which is an 18-month diploma, the only 18-month implant diploma currently in the UK. So if you want to begin your implant journey, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Find us at www.uniqueimplantraining.co.uk. We look forward to seeing you soon. Did it ever get to a point where you did have a face-to-face hearing to conclude everything?
Yeah. So that only happened in March this year.
Oh gosh, okay.
Yeah, so that only happened March in this year.
March 23. We look at it's 2 years later, basically.
That's what I'm saying. So
Right.
2 years of pain, heartache, suffering.
So what happened?
So obviously what happens before the hearing is you get all the evidence in a bundle. So you get their official statement to the GDC. You get all the information the GDC have ever requested. So they might ask for references from your previous employers, people you know, or people you've asked, and you basically get that in a bundle. And then you're basically, then you've got to write your statement, which is a very lengthy statement of your version of events. So I think throughout this, there was that emotional trauma, of I'm in the situation and none of it's true. And I need to, I've spent the last 2 years dealing with this, and now I'm going to have to relive it as well by putting it down on paper.
So you keep
and talking about it.
Front. After 6 months of a lull, then you end up having to go through it again. And then I'm presuming then is it face to face, literally? At the GDC
building, we went down with in London at the offices in Wimpole Street,
right?
And the interesting thing about a hearing, right, is that it's not that your indemnity coach you, but there is an element of that. And what you got to understand is that those guys aren't on your side.
Which guys? As in the GDC?
The committee. Yeah, the committee are not on your side.
Yeah.
Their job is probably to get something from that, if you think about it. Do you know one thing I always want to give people advice is talk less,
right,
and listen more.
Mm-hmm.
And as dentists, or a lot of dentists, we want to talk more, we want to get our point across, but people will value and respect you more and listen to your point of view when you talk less, because that's when you start learning. And for me, I was very measured, I was very controlled, and I think even they wrote that up. And I think it's important to take, even though you're feeling, you've got all these emotions inside you, to realize that you've got to limit what you say and what you can say, because everything you say, they're then gonna use that at some point, perhaps against you. So I knew that from the off. So for me, the hearing was very simple in a way, because I knew that everything was already documented. I put everything that I wanted to in the papers, really. And and the important thing, again, the advice I'd give is when the barristers are asking you questions, just answer the question.
Right.
Nothing else, nothing more. Not your opinion, not your take on things. Yes, no, maybe, whatever. Keep it short, keep it brief, but stick to answering the question, because once you start thinking you're trying to convince someone of something, you're not doing your job. You're being the lawyer, or you're being that's not your job. Your barrister's there to do that for you. Your job is to just respond to whatever questions and being asked, and just answer those questions.
So that whole hearing, how long does it last for roughly?
For me, I think it was a 3 day or two. Well, it was
Days?
scheduled 3 day hearing. Yeah.
You literally there? Oh gosh, I thought it was like going to be like a 3-4 hour thing. Gosh.
No,
So
you're there for
3
3 days. Yeah.
Gosh, that's
There's a
horrendous.
lot of.
And then how quickly do you get your judgment?
So for me, it was on the 4th day.
Also, they'll tell you there and
No. So part of it was remote, part of it was in person. So you do the in person bit first.
Yeah.
So after 2 days, they said you can go home now. We've done you, and they have their little, obviously, meeting and discussion around the case, and then obviously I think they came back on Thursday with the actual verdict.
Yeah, definitely. So that moment then, so you proved to be, well, what's the term? Not guilty.
Yeah. It was proven. All the charges that they have were not proven.
Yeah.
Basically, none of the, so obviously they took no further action because it was a nonsense case in the end. But it took 2 years to get there.
So what's that emotion?
I think it was interesting because my wife and everyone was really happy, but for me, it was like it should never have got to this. It should never have got to this.
Is it what, a bit of anger, elation? What is it?
I don't know. I don't really. There's very few moments where I'd say I get really, really happy or really, really. For me, it's my happiness is other people being happy. So even like, for example, as I said, one of the proudest moments when I became a dentist, for example, and I was happy and elated and it felt amazing. But for me, it was listening to my dad, like getting emotional about it, crying about it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
For me, like I buzz of other people getting happy for me, not me being happy. For me, it's I just feel like serving others, giving to people, helping others is what life's all about, and that's what makes me happy.
This has been dragging on for 2 years, and those original days, obviously, you know, the terror, the trepidation, the uncertainty around what's going to happen to me, but you managed to pull that around. So what happened? How did you, first of all, what helped you get through this?
I think the first few months you're feeling sorry for yourself. You're thinking, and even some days during it, there was anger, there was blame, there was this person's done it, this has happened, that happened. And then to me, that the worst thing, right, what people don't understand is that it devastates your life in terms of your relationship, because as a husband and wife, as a family,
right.
it's always talked about.
Yeah.
It's always on, and there'll be days where you don't talk about it and suddenly you might get an email from you, she wants this, they want that, and constantly you're being reminded of this situation all the time. And then you're struggling to find a job, you're constantly being reminded, and it almost like just completely overtakes your life. Your whole life becomes about this silly little thing that's going on in the background. And you do wish, and you look back and think, I wish I never gave it so much energy. I wish I never gave it so much. But at some point during I'd say probably around 6 months after this happened, you know, obviously it took me time to self-reflect, and it took me time, and I thought, you know, in the past I've used, for example, therapists, counsellors, things like that, to get me through stress of dentistry or whatever happened, you know, where suddenly you become a bit thinking, you think, I need some help, because
what is this prior to this?
Yeah, prior to this.
Really?
Prior to this, yeah.
That's interesting to tell me about that, because I never have. I've never had the need to. I mean, I'm very fortunate to say I've always had pretty, you know, smooth trajectory to this point. So that's interesting. Tell me. So you felt that things become overwhelming, that you need.
Yeah, I think it's important that I think the British culture is very much that stiff upper lip. We don't seek help, or we don't really want to get help. And I think dentistry more so, the idea of showing vulnerability, being able to, how can someone help me, that kind of thing. So yeah, I did have certain, and everyone has certain situations. It might be personal, it might be to do with work, it might be whatever, where I've had to seek out help. So I've had hypnotherapy at some point. I've had therapy. I've had different types of therapy, shall we say. And it's not on a regular basis. It's just more as and when you need it, sort of thing. So it might be that you go through 6-7 months, and then something happens and it triggers, and you think, I'm not really dealing with this properly, or not coping with this situation. And having that self-awareness, it was only, like I said, through you know, I've got some quite wealthy friends and things, and it was only through one of my friends mentioning that he had a coach that, you know, I thought, what do you mean coach? You know, coach is like football. What's a coach? It was only through speaking with him and then getting coached, that I fell in love with the idea of coaching, and then went on to do my ILM7. So
how did that come about then? So at what stage?
It was again like a chance kind of thing. It
So
was
what
like
stage was that? Is this during the GDC?
during the GDC complaint, yeah.
Right. So during the GDC complaint, you're obviously at a level where it's kind of just like, man, this is tough going. You just have an off chance conversation with a mate, and he's like, well, I've got a coach.
Yeah, and
Right.
it was like, oh, who's the coach then? And let me just find out a bit more about that. And to me, it's like anything. You're trying to find.
Well, what was he saying to you? You should try this, or
No, he wasn't even saying. He was just, he wasn't saying. He was just saying that, look, I use a coach when I make my business decisions and
Right.
what I do. So, he says I have a health coach, I have a life coach, I have a business coach, I have people who specialize in different areas, and it just sort of, I just found, I found it intriguing, and it was like, and and then you start questioning yourself, like you think, why are people successful? What is it that they do differently? We all have 24 hours in the day, and what is it that these guys are doing differently to be successful? And for me, it was like, I want to be like him. I want to be successful like him. I want to do the same things as him. But the idea of coaching just really intrigued me, because it was something that I'd sort of heard of, like in football, because I'm a big football fan, but I'd never really explored what a coach was or what a coach does and how coaching can help. And I think having that, and then having a coach and being coached, and thought, this is brilliant. This is exactly what I needed. This turned the needle for me. This completely changed my whole outlook on life. This changed my whole everything. It made me delve deep into who I am, understand my personality type, understand all what had gone on before, and realize that I'm carrying that baggage. I'm carrying that baggage every single day, and I need to let go of that baggage, because it's that baggage that's stopping me from progressing and stopping me from moving forward. So yeah, then I went on to do my ILM7, and that was like eye-opening, life-changing. It was like, wow, I feel like I've met more intelligent people than me. I've met people who think differently. I've met business leaders. I've met people who own, and these are the guys that you want to mix with, because these are the guys that will teach you stuff for free, and it's just simple little tricks, simple little things. You know what I mean? You realize that I wouldn't be sat here today talking to you if you met me during the GDC case or prior to this.
Yeah.
I'd be bricking it sitting here talking to you. Do you know what I mean? And there were so many goals that I've achieved. For example, setting up my own business, Clarity Coaching International. I planned to go on TV. I did it within 6 months. Everything I wanted to achieve, I know that I can do it, and I've now got that self-belief. It's just...
Which if you don't mind me asking, TV, where did you...
Yeah, so I came on Islam channel, which is a well-known Muslim TV channel, and that was like, for me, like a milestone, because it was like, everyone now knows about me, everyone talks about me. I've been on Dental Leaders podcast, which is probably one of the most well-known dental podcasts. So for me, I started gaining traction and started making moves, and all throughout there was this investigation going on in the background.
Yeah.
But for me, I got to a point where towards the end, it didn't even bother me. It just was like, all the coaching, all the skills I'd learned throughout this process meant that the hearing was, it was easy.
Just something in the background. You deal with it, and that's interesting. Well, the cool thing about this is that you were coming from a dark place. You found coaching, and it helped you through that, changed your mindset. I mean, I've been through similar things myself. I'm not going to dive into that today, but in the sense, I've had bags of coaching in various different forms. But then what then propels you to go the next step and say, right, well, you know what? I'm going to be a coach myself, and I'm going to set this up. What was the motivation behind that?
I think for me, like, I completely understood the concept. I loved reading about it. I loved listening to people. I looked into business leaders, and it's the preferred leadership style. Things have changed rapidly in business. People want coaching to be implemented in their organization right from the top. people want to make better decisions. So people need to understand exactly what coaching is. So coaching in essence is maximizing performance and unlocking potential. So you do that through being creative, through asking questions, and through unlocking someone. So the idea basically is that you, myself included, we've all got potential to do better. And it might be whether that's in dentistry, whether that's in your relationship, whether that's personal, whatever it might be, whether it's health. So we've all got certain things that we always want to get to, but we never really get there. And the reason why I believe firmly why we don't get there is because we don't spend enough time understanding the problem. Once you understand the problem and get full clarity on what the problem is, you then, through coaching, you get a full understanding, and you then can make better decisions. The outcome and where you are now is a product of all the decisions you've made along the way. To me, I'm quite relaxed about it, about my direction as well, because I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to help as many people as I can, serve as many people as I can, and make a difference. Because for me, I never got that gratification in dentistry. Maybe other people do, but I've never seen it where people are so grateful for what you've done that they'll remember you for the rest of their life. And that's the impact that coaching has, and that's why I've spent more time dedicating myself towards that.
So do you just coach dentists, or do you coach?
No. I would say a large percentage of my clients are non-dentists.
So where are they from?
Predominantly female dentists.
Really?
So predominantly females. Yeah.
And what sort of fields are they in?
So some can be just small businesses. So they've set up small businesses and they want particular help in a particular area. Some can be, for example, might be that they want help in marketing. The thing what I wanted to also get across on this podcast is there's a difference between coaching and mentoring. And we use those terms interchangeably, but they're two different things. So a mentor is somebody who is like a teacher. So they're going to teach you what they know and their knowledge and try and get the mentee or the person to the level that they're at, basically. So what you're trying to do is impart skills that you've got into that person and get them to the level that you're at. A coach doesn't necessarily have to be of that same sector or in that area. And especially in dentistry, we need to get away from this idea of you have to get the best endodontist or you have to get the best implant because they know everything and they can teach you everything. We've got to get away from that mindset, because even as an undergraduate, I'll go back to that, I felt that I learned more from the less experienced dentists, the ones that were in general practice, than I did from any of the professors or any of the top guys. And it's all about people, and business is all about people as well. So sometimes it's about finding people you gel with and getting on a level with them and working towards whatever it is you want to achieve.
I mean, for me, I've had this conversation with other dentists quite a few times. I can name dentists who have been so influential in my career, who have really been people who I look up to and still look up to. And I would say that, Paul Tipton being one of them, my brother-in-law Mohan Chawla being one of them, Italian dude called Stefano Conti being one of them, Mr. Daliwell, my very first principal, being one of them, and just this guy, has helped me in that first stage of my career, and then, different people come along and help me, and I will always reference back to these people being pivotal in my career and saying, they really helped me along the way. It sounds like you never had anybody who really helped you in that respect.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think, I'll be honest, from my understanding of dentistry, obviously, you're probably in that small percentage group who, because obviously we talked about how you had the confidence to place your own implant, just, and unsupervised, which I think, if you speak to most dentists, even doing something for the first time, not many people have the confidence to do that. They'll be honest about that.
That's interesting. So you think I'm in a minority?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
So talking to people, that'd be interesting.
I mean, if you look into associates, how many people work in the NHS compared to private sector? If you look at percentages and numbers and everything, I do think that this is why I get the top guys on my podcast, because they're doing something differently and they're moving differently, and they've got a different mindset, and they've got a different thing. But then there's a disconnect between them guys at the top and perhaps newly graduated dentists.
Yeah.
And I suppose my job is more to create a culture where it allows people to grow and get better.
Guys, as you know, I am the lead tutor of the Hedro Academy Vertical Preparation course. Now, we have put together this beautiful vertical preparation kit, which has been beautifully made by Former Dental Supplies. Simon at Former has kindly agreed to give one lucky winner of this podcast a kit completely free of charge, which retails normally at £220 plus VAT. So all you have to do to win one of these fantastic vertical preparation kits is just give us a like, subscribe to the podcast and share it, and leave a comment below, and we will pick one lucky winner every podcast, and Burkit will be finding itself in your clinic. Okay, so yeah, great guys. The Horacle Burkit by Hedro Academy and Former Dental Supplies. So, I mean, my experience is completely different to yours, complete opposite to yours. So I've always had good people around me, people that have inspired me, motivated me. I've worked in great practices and, support and motivation, should I say, then to go on and do my own things. Whereas it seems like you've lacked that. I've been involved in I was involved in foundation training for over a decade. That landscape changed a little bit, but I've always been involved in that. I've always been involved with the coaching and the mentoring. I actually did a coaching and mentoring course as part of foundation training, being a trainer myself. So I've been in that environment, which to me just seems normal. But I think if you're not involved in that, and I see that now actually, that maybe that is a niche in dentistry, and the rest of the dentists just left to the big bad world by themselves and just struggle along. That's what it's sounding like to me. Is that right?
Everyone's experience is unique, dentistry, and I think that's something we have to understand. But for most people, and I say this with the greatest of respect, for most people, it's a lonely profession. They're in that surgery on their own. A lot of the time, it depends on what type of practice, what type of relation they have with the trainer or the principal. It depends on what relation they have with the other dentist. It depends on what relation they have with the nurses. So a lot of the time, it's quite lonely. And as well, we've got to be honest, right? Time is money. People don't like you knocking on their door because they know that they're not going to get paid if they help you. And it's sad to say that, but that's the brutal truth of dentistry. For a lot of people, it's about money. And we need to, and money is, we get paid really, really well in dentistry. We do. We're highly skilled people. We get paid well. But what we lack is that people-orientated dentistry.
Do we not have that in other professions, then, in other fields?
Yeah, I mean, I see it differently. I see it differently. For example, my wife's a medic. Their training pathway is very different to ours. They have a larger group, for example, at university, so they have a more diverse friendship groups or social group. They then go on to working in a hospital for at least 2 years. They then come across even more diverse groups. They might have worked in different, studied at different universities. You're coming across people at different grades, consultants, middle, and it's a whole different experience because you're not just got exposed to that dental or medical school environment. You've now got exposed to a hospital environment. For people who generally work in general practice, only a small percentage go into hospital jobs. Most of them go straight into practice. So you don't get that diverse experience in terms of meeting different people. So I think in their role, and I think one thing, when I speak to my wife and listen to, they work very much so as a team. So even in A&E, when they've got, for example, a trauma case or whatever it might be, there's a series of people who are involved in that process, and it's very much a team effort to get the best outcome for that patient.
Tell me what you've seen. Let's dig into that a little bit more. So what do you observe? Being, as you told me, being late to the dentistry social media party. What have you observed? What do you think? How would you weigh up our profession?
Even recently, yesterday, I saw a post, and there was a principal, for example, he posted saying, "Where are all the associates? Blah blah blah." I've got a really good job here, wherever it might be, and where are all these associates? Why does nobody want this job? It's a really good job, and blah, blah, blah.
Interesting. What type of job was that?
I think there was some UDAs and there was some private. Yeah, it was some private, but and I don't understand what's happening and stuff. And most dentists are associates. Let's be honest, right? Only a small percentage or a percentage of practice owners. So there's more associates and there's more practice owners. What you got to understand is that you're in a market now where supply and demand. It's an associates market. So you've got to now tap into how can I make this job an attractive proposition for this associate to come and work for me. You've got to start thinking outside the box, because it's not like they want the job either in a way. So, but what I'm saying is that there's a disconnect, because practice owners aren't business people. Practice owners don't understand the psychology of an associate and what they want, and associates don't understand the psychology of a practice owner and what they want. And when then the two don't align, you get problems. And my job is to sort of, for them to understand, both parties to understand that the objective should be the same. And if it's not the same, then it's not the job for you two to come together.
So let's dig into that. What does the associate want?
So
tell me about it, because I'll just give you a brief background to this question. So I mean, you might know, I think you do know, I used to have a couple of NHS clinics, and I went through this very dilemma myself around the 2016 mark onwards, where I just thought, you know what, recruitment has become a little bit difficult. However, I didn't sit there and start writing social media posts bitching and moaning about it.
Yeah.
I just recognised that dentistry was changing, and myself, I didn't want to work in the NHS, so I kind of like had this understanding that, well, if I don't want to work it, then there's clearly associates coming, but they don't want to do it. They're not just going to do the job because I don't want to do it. It's not an attractive job in the first place. So that's why I sold my NHS clinics. I'm purely private now, and I feel that's the way dentistry is moving. So tell me, what is it from an associate's viewpoint? What is an associate looking for?
I think it varies. It really does vary. I think the issue you've got, right, is a lot of practices have really gone all in NHS dentistry, and they're now suffering because their whole model or business model has all been about UDAs. Oh yeah, we'll do a bit of private, and it's just not sustainable with the current cost of living, economic crisis, all these kind of things. It just doesn't work out. And I think the mistake that perhaps practice owners have made is that because their business is so NHS focused, they then try to sell that to the associate, and the associate's like, I'm not buying that because that's not attractive to me. That's what I want to run from. That's not something that I want to do. So the practice owner's hands are tied, because they've got this big contract that they've got to fulfill, and then they're trying to attract an associate to do that contract. And the second thing is that it depends on the mindset of the principal. The principal wants to pay the associate the lowest possible UDA rate that they could possibly get, and just get them to do the job and come home with the money. And it after a bit, it just doesn't work, because the associate gets fed up because it's not what they wanted. The principal gets annoyed because the associate's upset and moaning and groaning, and you just get a series of dentists, and a lot of practice will have experiences where they come, sign the contract, 3 months later they're gone, and there's a bit of bad blood between the two of them, and they move on. But what happens if that happens repeatedly is word gets around, people start talking, and people then steer away from that practice, because dentistry is a small world. Everyone knows each other. So if you start developing a reputation like that, no one's going to come and touch that job. And I think practice owners now need to be smarter. And you know, one of the guys that I spoke to earlier in the series on my podcast, Brad Thornton, what I loved about him, and when you listen to his podcast, he talks more like a businessman, and he talks more about what business should be about and what dentistry should be about. So he talks about paying your staff well and keeping them motivated, and paying nurses well and keeping the support team happy, because that's important. He talks about associates, and he talks about regularly discussing with them, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? How can we help you? You've got to you've got to be the coach, you've got to be the leader, you've got to have conversations with them. You can't just, here's the surgery, here's your nurse, get on with it. Call me if anything breaks down. Well, don't call me because practice manager will sort it out. You can't be like that, because if you're like that, you're just going to end up in problems, and probably like yourself, where you get fed up and think, I wanted an easy life here. It's so much harder. I'm going to get rid of this mess. And that's why I'm saying that the principal needs to be the coach. The principal needs to be the leader. The principal needs to direct things. And one thing that I still don't understand, and people have tried to explain to me, I still don't get it right. You both want the same thing. You both want more money. You both want a happy clinic, and you both want a happy environment. What's so difficult about achieving that? And why is it so difficult? Why is there such a principal versus associate culture?
Yeah, I think I could try and answer that a little bit. Because I've been on both sides of the fence, and I've owned NHS clinics, and now I run a private clinic. And I think ultimately, of course, as a principal, you would want a thriving, all singing, all dancing clinic. There are some success stories of some great mixed practices in some of the most deprived areas of the UK. So there are some success stories. However, Brad Thornton is Leeds based. I know Brad, not personally, but I know of him. He's got a lovely, lovely practice in a very nice area of town. It's Horsforth, which is a very affluent area. I'm based bang in the city centre. I'm a Heterodental right in the city centre, so you can imagine the passing trade that comes through there. So, building a practice like that, which is successful, where I can keep everybody motivated, where I can afford now to pay the staff the extra wages and motivate the associates. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, because the environment is there. If we now start going to some of the most deprived areas of the UK, where, say, 80-90% of your patients are going to be non-payers, non-fee payers, your business model is purely built on that NHS contract. So to be able to then be the coach, provide, send for argument's sake your associate on a composite bonding course or an implant course, it's not that valuable to the business, because the core of the business is getting those UDAs done. You see? Whereas I feel like the attitude prior to 10, 15 years ago, there was an understanding of this. Whereas now I think dentistry has changed to such a point where, and I feel it, social media has fueled this. Yeah. And I feel that, dental students now are almost not, they don't see that side of dentistry. The only side of dentistry they see is the sexy side of dentistry.
Have you heard of the twin dentists?
The twin, yes, of course, they're Leeds based.
And is that in an affluent area?
It's not a massively affluent area, but it's Leeds is not a huge city, and they've marketed it very well, and that's going against what I'm saying. I get that.
The point I'm trying to make is that things are rapidly changing.
Yeah.
Patients' attitudes Invisalign has been around for a long time. People now want it all the time.
Of course.
Composites have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
People now want Botox fillers, facial aesthetic, all these things. What I'm saying is that practice owners, especially the NHS focus, have been slow to react and understand that things are changing. So you need to, the practice and the business model needs to change as well.
Yeah.
Because you've got to, what I'm saying to you is that what that means is that these deprived areas and these areas, practice owners have to think that, what is my vision? Where do I want to be with this practice? Do I want to continue bashing the Nash, get someone as cheap as chips, and try and continue that? And how much money is it going to be making me? So you've got to have that insight and that understanding that is that really what I want? And if that is the case, that's what I want, then how am I going to solve that problem? So if I can't get a UK based graduate to work for me, then I need to pivot and move towards something else. So whether that means getting dentists from abroad, whether that means getting therapists to do some of the work, whatever it might be, you've got to have that plan and pivot towards that. But my point is that you've got to stop expecting different outcomes when you're still doing the same thing, because things are changing.
I agree with you 100%. Going back to the twin dentists, I mean, it's a purely private clinic. So if you are a purely private clinic, you can either base your model on doing cheapest trips, routine care, equivalent of the NHS, or you just go for it and offer the great treatments that we've just been talking about. But they've marketed themselves very well, and they're a success story. Of course they are. I agree with you 100%. I mean, even in deprived areas, people will find money.
That's the thing.
People will find money to buy things that they want.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
If you can sell yourself as a practice and as a person, and I think people forget. This is where I think, like, I did a study on, for example, my dentist, and I'm not calling them out or anything, so the disclaimer, but corporates have failed to understand this very important thing. The dentist is the most important person in the room. The dentist is the person who generates the practice money. The dentist is the person who the patients trust and believe in. It's not anyone else. So if that dentist has a great relationship with their patients, you need to empower them. And I think all dental practices need to use that model. It's all about retaining the top dentists. It's all about empowering the top dentists. It's all about motivating them and making your business model fit towards them in particular. And I know the danger is that I give them all this, I train them up, and then they go and do one and set their own practice. I completely understand
definitely
that issue. But then it's also about keep dangling the carrot, and they'll keep following you. At some point, they might end up. But when I'm saying, if you create an environment where they feel empowered, they trust you, you trust them, and they're earning enough, there's no reason whatsoever for them to leave. Because how much does it cost to set up a clinic? What are the running costs for even a one surgery practice? You've got to pay a dental nurse, you've got to pay a receptionist, you've got to set up there's a lot to consider. And then even an associate set up, for example, at one surgery or even two, they're not that. How much more are you going to get as an associate? So it's not always in their interest to go and set up their own practice. So what I'm saying is, you've got to create an environment that they thrive in, your business thrives in, and they feel like the most important person in the room.
Absolutely. But I can just, I think, because as I said, I've run different types of businesses. So I've been there. I've been with those dynamics of running a Nash clinic, running a private clinic. It's so much easier doing that in a private clinic because just everything's set up for that. If you're a principal, and if you've ever been in that position, I'm sure lots of principals will relate to this. If you've ever been in that position, see, the lights just came on, light bulb moment. If you're in that position of having to do, pay, clawed back money, honestly, it just kills you. It just kills you. And that's one thing that we can never get across to the associate, because the associate is never in that position where they have to write the check, or transfer that money back to the NHS, because it's not the associate's problem. And I get that completely. But to be fair, there's two ways you can do it. It's a case of you either build your business and tailor it and adapt it, as you've just said, or you just get out of it. And that's exactly what I did, because I saw it. I just figured that, you know what, this just isn't for me. This isn't the way I want to run my business. This isn't, I don't want to do this kind of dentistry anymore. And that was pretty much the bulk of the dentistry that was done back in the day, but it's changed now. I mean, what Tony Kilcoyne told me when he came on this podcast was privately delivered healthcare now delivers more. Privately delivered dental care now is more value-wise as NHS-funded dental care in the UK. Private is number one, which I was shocked to hear, and that's the way it's moving. So, just the NHS, honestly, it's a dying thing. Do you think?
I absolutely agree. Yeah. It is a dying thing, and it's fine for it to die. Like you said, you've got buttons that you can press. Get out, use that parachute, convert your patients to becoming private if you can. There's always solutions to the problem, but don't sit there thinking this is the worst case scenario, because everything is all about how you respond to it. And the sharp ones, perhaps like yourself, when you realise the recruitment crisis, I'm struggling to get associates. This practice doesn't serve me any purpose, and in fact, it's a bigger headache than than I need to get out. What I'm saying is there's always solutions to every problem, and the NHS being whatever and doing whatever is not really your problem. At the end of the day, you never had control of what contract they're going to ask you to deliver and what they're going to do. They can change the dynamics whenever you want, but I think the private and the goodwill is really the value of your practice. And I think if you spend time building that and building that and building that, that will serve you well, or it'll be more proof from things like a recession and things like that, because you're not just relying on the government to ask you to deliver cheap as chips dental care.
That's why I exited. I just thought this isn't the way I want to deliver, dental care anymore. So I got out of it. What's next for you?
So I mean, for me, I'm still growing my coaching practice and growing myself. To be honest, I'm actually growing myself in dentistry as well, because I'm going on a cosmetic course, which I've never done before. So I'm upskilling. I've just been on looking at different aligners and different. I don't want to plug anyone because I've not actually tried it out, but there are new things always happening. So myself, I am upskilling as a dentist and doing well, but there are other opportunities that I'm looking at and looking to help on a coaching level as well. So I'm always looking to improve myself, and my goal has always been to have a good work-life balance where I can do my dentistry 2 or 3 days a week, but I can also dedicate time to my coaching. And I think if I get there, and I'm not too far off there, if I get there, then for me that's a fulfilled life. And I think, like you said, you've then got to also diversify your portfolio, whether that's investing in things, whether that's property, whether that's cryptocurrency, whether that's stocks, shares, whatever you might be. I've become more entrepreneurial. I've started to look at other ways to make money rather than just working as an associate or just expect your income to come from dentistry, because there are other ways of making money, not just through dentistry.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Tell us, how can we find out about your coaching courses?
So I personally, at the moment, for me, this isn't about money as such.
Yeah.
So some coaches out there, and there's a fair few. I genuinely think coaching hasn't been presented in the right way to dentistry or the dental profession. And and there's certain coaches, even you hear on social media, they'll be like, they lost me money and blah blah blah, and I trusted blah blah blah, and I just think that it's been presented in the wrong way. And then there's other coaches out there that are selling you dreams and telling you things that just aren't true. So you've got to come from a starting point of, okay, I do like the idea of coaching, and I do like the philosophy of coaching, and I can see how this might benefit me. So I would only appeal to those kind of people. But the thing with dentistry, we have a very closed mindset. We think we're right, and we're always right no matter what, and we have to always be right. And I've had it myself where I've spoken to practice owners, and it's like, you're an associate, what can you teach me kind of mentality. And if you've got that already mentality and that limiting belief that nobody can teach you something, or you see them as lower, then you're never going to get anywhere with that person, are you? Because they're already in that mindset of, you're just an associate, you've never run a practice, what do you know about that? So I think my thing is that I want people to change their attitude towards coaching and understand that it's not about we can always learn. We can learn from everyone we come across. Even some of the most intelligent conversations I've had are from people from the most deprived backgrounds or have the most deprived jobs. There's always things you can learn from people, and I always have that mindset. And I always try to, perhaps like we talked about Jordan, I always try to follow their arguments, and always try to follow their limiting beliefs, and try to follow and try to understand. And there's always people who you'll always come across and you'll always learn something. So I want dentistry to adopt this idea that we should always think we don't know it all, and we should always adopt an attitude that we've always got so much more to learn, and we should never stop learning, and we should never stop basically coaching, really, because I think coaching will always move you along You can't, if we keep playing that victim card of, it's awful, it's negative, NHS dentistry is awful, they don't pay us enough, this is happening, that's happening, it's all the government's fault. Well, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? You're not going to get anywhere like that. You've got to have that self-awareness and understand that. Stop blaming everyone else. Take control of your situation and write that next chapter tomorrow. Take control and say, look, enough's enough. I've taken enough, and I've had these limiting beliefs for far too long. I can achieve what I want to achieve, but do I have that discipline? Do I have that motivation? Am I going to change my habits? Am I going to be consistent? Am I going to get a coach? Am I going to get help? And am I going to stop thinking I can get this help from reading books or watching YouTube videos? Because they're not going to get you anywhere, because you're going to watch them for 5 minutes, you're going to listen to them, and you're going to move on. A coach is somebody who's going to literally have that accountability, hold your hand, push you, get you to where you want to be. And, to be honest with you, like myself, I don't even charge a lot, because for me, dentists, we get paid well. So it's not, it shouldn't be an issue, really, getting professional help.
No, I agree. I think, I agree with pretty much everything you've said there. The funny thing is I kind of have been on that journey indirectly, and I've had some wonderful coaches and people to help me throughout my career. But clearly, people are not aware that these resources exist. So, how can people find you?
So obviously I've got my website, Clarity Coaching International. I'm quite active on Facebook predominantly, but I do have a LinkedIn page as well as an Instagram page. For me, I offer free complimentary coaching calls, because for me, I do want to talk to you, but I don't like people, people who are intrigued. It doesn't mean that you have to go for it, but pick up the phone, have a conversation, think about it. I know the initial reaction is, no, I don't want that. But if you, like you said, if you never explored that opportunity, you've never gone on that journey, you just don't know where it's going to take you. And I genuinely believe in the philosophy and in the idea of it being able to help people. It's just, you have to say that, look, I'm ready to be coached. I'm ready to show my vulnerabilities, get rid of that baggage and create the new you and create the person who you want to get to. And like I said, for myself, I genuinely have achieved and will continue to achieve. And this hasn't happened by chance, me sitting here, me being able to be so active on social media, me, getting like some of my posts to see over 20,000 people accessing it, seeing it. Even the people you come across in real life, like people are like, oh, I follow you, I listen to what you, I think you're doing a good job. You can already tell that you're making a difference to people's lives. And for me, I've already sort of achieved that in such a short space of time. It's not that long. I spent 10 years prior to the GDC case, and what I've achieved in the 2 years that I've not achieved. And I'm not saying I'm not saying I've done anything wrong or have any regrets, but you will do later on in life when you look back and think, did I use my time wisely? Did I do what I wanted to do? Did I achieve my purpose? And people will remember you for it. And I think that's important. You've got to look at the end goal. We're all going to die one day. We're all going to end up old. We're all going to, and have we really lived a life that's fulfilled to ourselves and true to ourselves? And have we developed those relationships, well enough?
Sure. Well, no, I think thanks for coming in today. I mean, it's interesting to hear the other side, because I've always looked at things through a principles lens, and thanks for telling us your story. And I wish you best of luck with Clarity Coaching International. We'll obviously link it in, and wish you every success, and thanks for everything.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well on this show, and I really appreciate it. And guys, if you want to get in touch, just drop me a message. I mean, you'll find me. I am very, very active on social media. So yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.